Hello and welcome to the Knowing Self, Knowing Others podcast, where we discuss self-aware leadership with thinkers from around the globe. I'm your host, Nia Thomas. Join me as we talk to today's guest. Today, I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Grant van Ulbrich, who is a native of Kansas, and his journey has taken him from the US Navy to the high seas of the cruise industry. With over 2 decades of experience in sales and leadership role, Grant is a trailblazer in sales transformation and change management. He's now based in London. He holds a master's degree and a doctorate in sales transformation. As a certified coach and founding fellow of prestigious institutes, Grant's expertise extends far and wide. He's written a book and co-authored a second book, and he has a TEDx talk that has already been watched over 1 million times, and 2 of those were me. Join us as we dive into Grant's quite remarkable story of service, innovation, and continuous improvement. Welcome, Grant.
Dr. Nia, thank you so much. It's a joy to be here with you today.
Great to see you. So tell us about your career journey to here.
My goodness, that how much time do you have? I'm 52, so I've got a little bit to go. But no, seriously, I've spent probably the last 25 years in the cruise industry, and it's been a joy, such a pleasure. But as you mentioned, my TED Talk, if you see my TED Talk, you'll understand the transition that I made from growing up in Kansas to going into the military and then coming out of the military in California. And I went into real estate there. And after a skiing accident, a very tragic accident that I nearly lost my life, I spent a year in recovery. 2 titanium plates and 12 titanium pins I was the father of. It was how was I going to start over? And through mastering all of the conflict and change, but that incident actually would bankrupt me and make me homeless for a second time in my life. And it was then that I discovered, after recovery, a year later, the cruise industry. And the cruise industry has just been phenomenal. It is a place in travel and tourism and hospitality. There's something about putting people on a ship, and the ship departs, and you have over 90 different nationalities from around the world in one location, and somehow peace is possible. Whenever we are in land and we watch the news and we see that, oh, well, about all the conflicts, and they say that the world is not going to get any better, you know that that's just not true when you live and work in the cruise industry, because we see so many people, even from conflicting nations, that all of a sudden are brothers and sisters in having a great time together. So peace is truly possible. But it's been a long journey in this industry and a very fruitful one. I started as an entry-level cruise consultant, just telling people where they're going to go, what they're going to do, and how to make the most of their voyage, leading all the way up to becoming the first in the world to graduate the sales master's program, then the sales doctorate in sales transformation, and becoming an author, a certified coach, and then creating a personal change model. Who does that?
Yeah,
Um,
indeed.
it's a very different world, but it led me to you and to your organizations as well. And it's just a wonderful journey to be on.
Wow, that is quite a journey and a winding journey at that.
So true.
So tell me what your thoughts are on self-awareness. As you know, that we are a self-aware leadership podcast, and it's
Mhm.
really helpful to understand what guests define as self-awareness as a starting point so that we know the journey that we're on for the rest of the conversation. How do you define self-awareness?
It's interesting because you don't hear a lot of people talk about it. And really, your show, from my perspective and my global practice, you're one of the first that I've come across that actually speak of it on a regular basis. Are we aware? Are we self-aware? And do we have the conscious ability to recognize that we are? And I don't think many people are. I think as the advance of AI and the advancements of digital technologies, etc., a lot of people are just flowing through the journey. And I see so many people caught up with these. We live in a world of technology which is supposed to advance us, but here I am with 2 phones, not just one, but 2. And I see that so much. And I see people just consumed. And all of a sudden you look up when you are tired and you're like, wait a minute, where'd that hour go?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
You've been trapped in time. So self-awareness. For me, self-awareness is the ability to have cognitive reflection on what you are doing, where you are, and what your contribution and what your actions are to your surrounding immediate world and to the greater world around you. Self-awareness. How do you see yourself? And you're consciously aware of what you are doing and what you're contributing, and to yourself and to others. And I think that that is a skill set that is very much lacking.
Interesting. Well, we will certainly talk more about that because I'm interested in how that fits, particularly with senior leaders in organizations. But
Mhm.
before we do that, tell us more about Scared So What? What is it all about?
There you go. Scared, so what? So you talk about awareness. I think this is a critical awareness model. So Scared, so what was born in my sales master's program, believe it or not. In 2018, I went here in London to Middlesex University and Consalia Sales Business School to learn how am I supposed to lead sales transformation. And transformation is to get us out of the 1980s consultative sales tips and tricks, manipulation, everything to force, a sale through. The times have changed, and that's nowhere longer where we live. So how do you facilitate that transformational journey? And in doing so, module 4 of the master's program was on change and change management. And honestly, that's where Scared So What was born. I learned about the global leading organizational change models in the course. And one day when we were in a live cohort sitting in class, I just couldn't get it. I said, I'm sorry, I can't use all of these models on my people. And the professor said, well, why not? And you imagine how many people have been through the course. And here I am, the first American in class, objecting to it, saying, I can't use this. I'm sure they were just dumbfounded, but I was the one who was dumbfounded. And I took the courage to actually say, I don't understand how I'm supposed to use this. And they said, why? I said, because this doesn't reflect on my life. Being homeless twice, nearly died, I didn't accept the change. And if you look at these models, they are all prescriptive and say that you will accept the change each and every time. These are organizational change models designed to be used on people. Where's the model for me, the individual? And they said, well, that doesn't exist. And I said, exactly. So, how am I supposed to lead others through change when we don't even have a model to help them manage their own personal change? And so, brilliantly, thank goodness, my professors at that moment could have said, you know what? This is what we have. This is 100 years of change management. You need to embrace this and go forward. But they didn't. They used reflective coaching and said, what is at the heart of your feelings right now? What are you feeling? And I said, I'm scared. I'm afraid I'm going to fail this class. Keep going. They kept pulling it out. And that
Okay.
scared theme, they didn't know either where it was going, but that scared theme was there. That fear of this change, because I thought I was going to fail the class that day and fail a lot of people, all my salespeople in my company. And through that, scared, I said, I want to be able to help people to embrace the fear of change. And if we can learn to embrace it, then maybe we can learn to manage it. And we kept going through the discussion, and so what kept coming up. So what? So what? So what does it mean? So what do you think? And I was like, we need a so what, don't we? So all of these organizational change models say that the change is done, but that's not true. Nobody's asking me as an employee, do I accept the change? Do I reject the change? Or am I conflicted? Nobody asks those questions. You haven't even thought of my so what. And that's where the model was born. So we created Scared to focus on your feelings so that you can actually start to break it down and manage change and make an informed decision, no longer assuming, right? We wanted to remove assumption and the fear of change. And then we wanted to help people make their own so what plan. So that's what it does. So scared is, I'm surprised, I'm conflicted, or I champion the change. What actions could I do? Am I receptive or do I reject this change? Because it considers both options. Organizational change models don't do that. Could I explore any other options? And what decision can I make? And it's funny, people think that a decision is just that, but it's not. There's a positive decision, which means it's favorable. There's a negative decision, which means I don't like it. I'm not going to do this. And there's also something called indecision. And that's where people get stuck. And I often, when I talk about this, have you ever raised your hand if you've ever been stuck saying, I don't know what to do. Could somebody just tell me what to do? Exactly, right? And that means that you've gone straight into assumption. But if you learn how to assess your feelings and make an informed decision, you're now in charge of it. So what's your so what? What's your strategy? What's your options? What's your way forward? What actions can you take? Do you have hope or know how it's going to work? Your actions, and then how do you take ownership? Building your own so what, where organizational change models stop. So that's what Scared So What is. We've put it into an app. It's a quiz. It's a digital quiz that you can use over and over again. You can build a digital so what plan. So now, for the first time ever, you can get all of this change fear out of your head and put it into an app. And now it's something that's tangible. You can actually manage it and you can deal with it and you can work with it. So it's called Scared So What?
Fascinating. And listeners and watchers, if you really want to know more about that, I definitely recommend you starting with Grant's TED talk because it really does help and it shows you, it has diagrams in it, and you can really see what this means and what it might mean for you and your organization or your team or even your family. And I think it's such a helpful way of setting out what does change mean for me. My thought is that if you're grappling with personal change, that there has to be an element of self-awareness in that. Is that how you see it?
Yes. So that's what it is, exactly what the model does. So scared is the process of recognizing your feelings, becoming self-aware. And it is the journey of that awareness and just critical reflection and critical discovery. So if you think about change, what people go through it, and especially a fearful change, but the opposite is also true, a positive change. So think like getting married, moving house, getting a new job, all those wonderful things. You still feel stress, anxiety, fear, nervousness, rapid breathing, cold sweats, goosebumps, etc. It doesn't matter if it's a positive change or a negative change. But to your point, how do we become aware of what we can and cannot manage and what we can and cannot control? Scared does that. So it allows you to break down the change and get out of your assumptive feelings and assumptive directions and knee jerk reactions. You've heard that before. And it allows you to break it down so that you can become more critically aware of where you can stand. And then from there, you can actually can control your journey. And so I think from a self-awareness perspective, this tool is very enabling and very empowering to do just that.
What are your thoughts if somebody is coming to change and they don't have self-awareness? Does Scared So What help them to achieve it, or do you have to work with somebody to get them to a point where they can then work through the scared element?
Yeah, it's a good question, and there's two schools of thought. The app actually facilitates it for you. So the app will do self-facilitation when you go through the quiz. So the scared part, what we're trying to do is to all of a sudden make you interact and reflect on the change. So how we do that is with a self-assessed quiz. And in that, you name the change itself. So let's say it's a new job. You name it, new starting a new job on Thursday. Great. You now are in a digital control. Since we love to be in a digital world, we're actually putting it to work for yourself versus just swipe and scroll. So then once you've named it, you start to then take the quiz and you're reflecting on each question on your change. And it's 30 questions. We ask the same question six different ways so we can assess truly what is inside you unconsciously. So we're tapping into your unconscious bias as well. And then it gives you that critical outcome. So it now allows you to see visually in color codes. Red is negative, green is favorable, and gray is indecision. And then you can see your scores and your weights. So everything comes to life for you. So whether you realize it or not, you then are becoming self-aware because the change is now coming out of here and going into a tangible item you can hold to touch. And so it does help to facilitate you on that journey. But likewise, as a supervisor within an organization, I then, as a coach, if I'm using transformational leadership and coaching practice, I can then use it to help further make my employees self aware. So if the employee has gone through a scared quiz and they feel trust enough to come and share it with me, I then can use scared so what again to pull it out. I can help them to build their own so what plan as well too, furthering their education and furthering their own awareness of their identity and their change management.
I like that idea of it being very visual. As you said, it's red if you're negative, it's green if you're positive, and the grey is that part in between. And I think that really does demonstrate what you said at the very beginning, that our change models that we're usually used to is this singular line that expects that you go up and down and that you come to an end. But actually, if we're saying there's red and green, well, you can go up, you can go down, you can move. It's not that singular line, is it? It can really be a squiggly line.
My journey was so interesting. You look at these organizational change models, so many of them have been manipulated by organizations to suit
Mm,
their narrative. One true, and I'll give just a little bit of my book away, the Sara curve. Many people attribute that back to Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who created the change curve. And they said that this was her model. Well, I actually interviewed her son, Ken Ross, who is the president of her foundation, because she's unfortunately no longer with us. And he said, my mom didn't make that. She didn't make the SAR curve at all. People came to her many times. She was aware that people wanted to use her models within business practice. And every time she said, that's not what it's for. I built this for people who are experiencing death and dying in a clinical medical facilitation, not for business. And it's amazing how many people just adapted it anyways. And it's always been attributed to her. And unfortunately, she's no longer here, but her children are. And so I thought that was amazing. Models can be adapted and models can be used unintentionally or intentionally in different ways. And so what I've built was Scared So What. I based the model on energy, positive energy, neutral energy, and negative energy, because it has to match the way the human mind works. We can accept change and we can reject change. And sometimes we're just in the middle. We don't know where to be. So there has to be a model that supports that.
And it feels like where we are in the world of work, we are moving out of that industrial paradigm where employers did things to their employees, to employees being engaged and being part of decision making. And I think this tool is of its time, it's needed now, and it really does reflect what change is for people in the world of work now. No longer do we tolerate our employers doing things to us. We want to be part of that conversation. So I
Mhm.
think it's really useful.
Thank you.
Tell me about your cruise industry experience. I'm particularly interested in the leadership of that. What are your observations of leadership within the cruise industry? Because, of course, the cruise industry is massive, isn't it? It's huge and it's global.
Huge. Yeah, you're talking about 50 plus years of innovation. Royal Caribbean alone, 60 plus vessels around the world. But
Mm.
there are hundreds and hundreds of cruise ship vessels around the world, hitting every country, hitting every port. It's just such a vast industry that affects literally the whole world. But leadership, how do we define leadership? There's so many different viewpoints on it. And me, I like to stick with a foundation because there are many different variable styles that can be applied to leadership. But if we look at what is the starting point, whether it's transactional leadership or transformational leadership, and transactional leadership is about a methodology of tell. I am going to tell you what to do and I'm leading. Transformational leadership is much harder. It is about fostering empathy, care, development, and it is about not self recognition, but recognizing the efforts and strengths and successes of the others. And it involves coaching and mentoring. So there's a vast different amount of elements that go into that. And if you look at the cruise industry, we're no different from any other industry. We have all realms of leadership styles, leadership practices. So it really is varied. But I will say that the cruise industry itself, if I think of the ships, it's very much from a positive military style of structure. And if you think about it, I know these both of these worlds because I was in the military on ships as well too. You have this almost the same identical ranking system: captain, staff captain, officers, senior officers, junior officers. And so a ship is run that way. And so the leadership teams of the ship are structured and they are barred. You will have actual stripes and bars and ranks. There's a deck department, and then there's a hotel operations department. So the deck is all the ship functions, engineering, nautical, all of the structures, safety, security, all of that, life-saving forces. And that leadership is very strong and stringent. And it is based upon rules for safety and life of sea. But there's also the empathy that's brought over from the hotel side. So the hotel side has the same kind of structure for the leadership. So you have a hotel director, which is kind of like the captain of the hotel.
Mhm.
You have an associate hotel director, which would be like the staff captain. You have guest relations officers, revenue officers, training, human resource officers as well. So it's all officer ranked and based and structured off of respect, dignity, fostering development and care for all of the employees and which are the crew members on board. So the leadership from the ship side's perspective is structured, but
Mhm.
it's also with a nice, polite balance of hospitality. We want everybody to have a good time. We care about each other. We care first and foremost for our crew members and our guests, but our crew are the reason why we can have our guests on board. So it is very much a family. So while you still have that military type of a structure, there's also a whole undertone of care, empathy, and development that's there as well too. But yeah, you do have all spectrums of leadership types, and there's some good and there's some very bad as well too. And fortunately, the bad kind of find their own way off.
Indeed. And as you were talking there, I was thinking in other leadership roles, people go home at the end of the day. But
Mhm,
in a cruise ship, you are all together 24/7. So if that care and respect goes a little bit pear-shaped, you have
mhm.
to deal with that 24/7. So as a leader on a cruise ship, there's never a point where you're not the leader on that cruise ship, I guess.
Exactly. You're always on. We have this knowing sense of strategy that we are always on,
Mm,
and it's there's a deck. There's the main deck, which is called the I-95, and this is where the crew pass through. The I-95 is a thoroughfare that goes from bow to stern, and that differentiates deck one and above is for our guests. And deck one and below is for our crew, and it's where the crew live. And you always have a sense of always on when you go deck one up, you
right.
know? Then for the officers, just as you've said, when you go down below decks to the crew areas, you're still on.
Yeah.
But that's where it becomes truly family, right?
Mm,
Because you're living there.
okay.
And we all have an immense respect for our captains, for our staff captains. We respect the ranks, just like you would in military as well, too. So when you see somebody, and we always wear our uniforms, so you've got our bars and stripes, and so and you get to know them because you're on board for anywhere from 4 months at a time to 9 months, and sometimes it just depends on your department and position. But it truly is a family. And I remember scenarios to where, as a person from Kansas, I had never met Serbians, Macedonians, Croatians, etc. How am I supposed to do that? And the first time I met people from different countries like that was in the cruise industry. And what a wealth of knowledge exchange happens when
Mhm.
you can meet people outside of your norms. And
Yeah.
I think the cruise industry is where you truly, we have to often say our travel agents will tell you, our travel advisors also will say, travel is the thing that truly sets you free. And
Mm.
it expands your mind better than any other textbook because you're learning so much of the globe and so much of different cultures and language and cultures, settings, and you can bring that into your own perspective of how you're going to live and work. But it's a great place to be.
Yeah, how interesting. And it's certainly an industry that I know nothing about. So I've learned a lot today. You mentioned there briefly some leaders are good and some leaders are not so good. A question that I really like to ask my guests, and it was something that I looked at specifically in my research. Do you think that people at the most strategic level of organizations have more self awareness than people at other levels of organization?
If I were to say yes, that would be an assumption without fact or without evidence. And so
Okay.
I have to stick with no at the moment.
Okay.
Because just because you are in a more strategic position doesn't mean that you are truly aware of your behaviors and your expressions and what you portray and what you give out. And I think self awareness, to be truly self aware, you need to be conscious of. your actions, your behaviors, what you put out into the world, and how people see you and visualize you. What vibes am I giving off? I think that there's no expression, but there actually is, and people can read my behavior just by my reflection of my voice and tone and my look. So, can I say that just because you're in strategic leadership position, you're more self-aware? No. You might be great at numbers, you might be great at analyzing, but you might be horrible at leading.
Yeah, and that's the general consensus I'm having from everybody that I speak to. But it's
Well,
the
there you
very
go. Thank you.
opposite.
I was
The
wondering if
very
I was going to pass the quiz.
But it is the opposite of the research that I undertook, or the literature review I took of the research
Yeah.
that had been done. I really do think that this is linked to this industrial paradigm versus the knowledge paradigm that we are moving into, and I think that that change is very, very evident.
I agree with you. And it's interesting. We talk about leadership and who can practice it and who can't. I remember in my doctorate doing my literature review on transformational leadership, and it showed that the vast majority of evidence showed that senior leaders are the only people who could practice transformational leadership.
Oh,
And
okay.
they kept referencing CEOs and senior vice presidents and people like CFOs and board members, people of high affluence and high positions. But yet, to get into the doctorate program, I had to qualify for my bodies of public works. And some of my public works within the cruise industry, I did as a junior level manager.
Mhm.
So, how do you practice transformational leadership wherever you are? And in my dissertation, I actually showed the evidence of where it is possible for anybody. It's about you. How can you be the entrepreneur? How do you tell the story using narrative hermeneutics? And then what types of tools will you give to lead others? Because you can lead from anywhere. You don't have to have a title. And I've proven that multiple times over within the cruise industry, building big departments, building the first office of diversity and inclusion in the entire cruise industry. I did that as a director, junior level director. How do you do that? 100,000 people strong, but yet all of a sudden you're getting an entire cruise line to shift towards diversity and inclusion. Um, it just shows that it's possible when you learn what you can and cannot practice.
And that is definitely something that I'm interested in is the notion of leaders at all levels and leadership at all levels, because I think you're right that you don't need to have a leadership title or director in your title or any such thing, and you don't even have to line manage people to be a leader, because I think if any of us listening and watching think about the people that we worked with, there is often somebody who can represent others, lead others. There's that person who has become the unofficial social secretary
Yeah,
because they can mobilize people to organize things and they can bring people together for social events, whatever they may be. They are leaders in their own right, regardless of whether they have it in their title. So I'm
true.
interested to hear that. And I was thinking that when you were talking about the different levels of the ship, how actually different people move up and down, and it doesn't necessarily matter what stripes you have, whether you are able to lead or whether you're not. It is
Mhm.
not necessarily linked to self-awareness and your job description. They may be
Exactly.
pulled apart.
Absolutely true. I love it.
What are your predictions for future demands on the world of work? Not to put you on the spot or anything, but where do you think we're going to go in terms of the our future demands as employees, and what are organizations going to look like in the future?
That's a really good question, and I would be a fool to say I have the answers. But from all the different conferences I've been at, there's so much more a conversation on AI, and there is a real debate on companies being able to adopt it and use it versus IT departments saying with blanket statements, nobody use it, it's not permitted within our company. There's a global movement on technology even further, and I am concerned. I'm fine with AI once I start to understand it. I'm fine that too, especially to understand that we've been using elements of AI for the past 70 years. You think chatbots, you think WeChat, you think all the different types of technologies that are coming through. Those are all formulations of advanced technology. So I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is the ability for social. community, the community engagement and the community responsiveness and the community responsibilities of people. With the advancement of technology and mobile technology, where people are just sitting here stuck glued in their phones, we are losing cognitive skill sets. So I'm not talking about being able to eat and walk and fall. I'm talking about how to think, how to have a conversation, how to articulate a sentence, a structure, how to tell time, for goodness sakes. Unless the phone tells them what time, we can't read clocks. You think about penmanship, cursiveness, you think about all the cognitive skill sets that we are losing. And what happens when the power goes out?
Yes.
There's a beautiful example just this week, and this will date this episode, but this week in America, in Baltimore, a cargo ship that was sailing towards a bridge lost power twice.
Yes.
That was a beautiful example of what happens when the power goes out. Well, disaster happened in that scenario. The bridge collapsed. It ran right into a bridge. Same thing's going to happen one day. You've already started to see stores and retail outlets when the power goes off or the computer has a functional problem that they shut down. People can't think. People don't know how to count back money, change. They don't know how to function. And so I think that we have a wake up call that we need to adhere to and say, how do we make sure we teach the future generation to maintain cognitive skill sets so that we're not stuck in a position of when the power does go out or there is a, God forbid, a glitch or a cyber attack or something that takes it out for us, that we can no longer function in society. And that's a danger. And if we let go of all of our cognitive skill sets and our ability to count, think, cache, speak, reflect in real time in human talk, we're going to have a problem. And that's concerning to me. So I'm all for AI, but I'm also for keeping up our ability to be human, right?
I think that's certainly something that I thought about. I've gone paperless probably for the last 7 or 8 years, and all of my information is now electronic somewhere, saved, backed up, saved again. And when the electricity goes out, I cannot access any of it unless
Yeah.
I'm able to go to my bookshelf and pick up a book, a solid book in my hand. I have none of that. And I
Let,
think you're right.
let me help you with that. I'll give you an example. This just happened to me 2 weeks ago. I've been at my company now for 16 years, and you can imagine the files that I have on my OneDrive, on my OneCloud, right? Somehow, the entire thing got wiped out. I lost years of files,
Oh,
years. Where do you go to get all of that back? And some will say,
nothing.
oh, well, it should be backed up. It was. It was the backup that was wiped out,
Um,
which then went into the main file. So I have to start over.
we are not
It,
prepared for
it,
that.
it's already happening, you
Yeah.
know. Fortunately, I can tell time and I can count change back at the retail. So I'm old enough to know how to still run a cash and a till register. But you know where I'm going with those discussions. Our younger generation, I really fear for them. They if the whole world transitions to digital and full complete AI to where we don't have to think or do a thing, that's kind of scary. That's
Yeah,
you know.
I think the loss of skill is quite concerning. And the more
Mhm.
conversations I'm having, the spectrum between high IT technical complex use and the need for more humanized human behavior is
Yeah,
becoming more in demand, and that actually the two ends of a spectrum is becoming further and further. But those are the two things that we need, those two
yeah.
things that are furthest away. And how
Hmm.
do we bring those together? Because you're right, when the electricity goes out, where are the plumbers,
Where's the
who can cook?
skills?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think of all those people in the trades,
mm,
the community colleges to where they went and learned, like plumbing, electrical, wiring, engineering, structural designs, how to build a house or build a building. All of those people, those skills, those are not so much computer and technology driven to where they are manual labor driven. And it's a shame how society looks down on them, but
yeah,
those are the people that built us, you
yes,
know. And I too get it. Scared so what will eventually become an evolution from the app to an AI. It has to, because that's the way society is going. So I eventually see a digital coach. to where somebody will come up and hopefully they'll have a personal face and look at least to feel human, but it will be AI helping coach people through personal change, and almost like their own friend that they can have pocket friend right there for them. Um, Unfortunately, things have to go that way because that's the way the world is consuming data and information and knowledge today. But if we can remind them, but put me down for a little bit,
Yeah.
still have to touch the world and feel it.
Absolutely. Listeners, watchers, we've got quite philosophical at the end of our conversation here, but that is definitely something that you can ponder on about your organization and the work that you're doing. How are you both enabling that AI world whilst making sure that the physical connection that we really did miss when COVID happened, how do we retain that and the skills that you need to have those relationships within that very physical world that we all love to be in?
Mhm.
Grant van Ulbrich, it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me. And I really, really love using the Skid So What. The app is on my phone. I use it regularly, and it definitely helps me to reflect on where I am, where I'm going, and the changes I want to make in my world. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate it. And for all your listeners, you can go to scaredsowhat.com right now and you can download the app for free as well. I encourage you to do that so you can start to manage change for yourselves. My gift to you.
Amazing. We will make sure that there are links in the show notes as ever. But for today, thank you.
Thank you.
Are you a chief executive or a senior leader within your organisation? If so, it would be great to have you join me on the podcast to share your journey, experiences, and lightbulb moments along the way. Drop me an email at info@knowingselfknowingothers.co.uk if you'd be interested in having a conversation. Thank you for joining me on today's episode where we aim to develop self-aware leaders around the globe to generate kinder, more respectful and creative working relationships through reflection, recognition and regulation. Head over to my website at knowingselfknowingothers.co.uk to sign up to my newsletter to keep up to date with my blog, podcast and book. Looking forward to having you on my learning journey.